Today, from our perspective, we'll take a look at generative AI just to make sure everybody's on a level playing field. Take a quick look at prompt engineering and how do we get the best out of AI with some specific examples focus on product and project management, and then go into a deep dive of specific use cases and how we can use Gen AI. It's only been around a year, maybe 18 months since GPTs and large language models have taken off. For purposes of this presentation, what I've used is ChatGPT 3.5, the free version, but you could expect better results if you do pay for version 4 or various other solutions out there. On the right, and this is somewhat a little older now, but April of last year, I found this chart of just that showed the proliferation of chat engines. And now, if you're familiar with a website called Hugging Face, which has a list of these models, there are well over 600,000 different models. They're obviously not all at the capabilities of ChatGPT, but there are many that are specialized for different individual use cases. So it is exploding. It does have its challenges, though. We have to be aware of copyright issues, hallucinations, the idea that it is making stuff up. It does have its biases. It does make mistakes. It's not always correct. What's interesting, though, it does appear honest, authoritative, and correct. So even though it might be making something up or not have the right answer, it does appear to be correct. It is changing the world. And just this morning, I saw a couple news articles in Forbes related to this. One, the annual work index trend from Microsoft and LinkedIn that 75% of full-time workers report using AI. 6 months ago, it was only 46%. They don't really go into detail of how much they're using it, but it's 3/4 of full-time workers. Well, a little over half are actually reluctant to admit using it and worry it makes them replaceable. What I think is more interesting of those that are adopting AI, they do report an increase in productivity. Various different reports do bear this out. But then 93% of the people in this study replied that it has use of AI and their increased productivity has led to an increase in compensation, which makes everybody happy. Above all, I think as you use ChatGPT, I'm a huge proponent of it, and I will constantly reference ChatGPT, but it's any of the very capable models out there. I think of it as an intern, something that's capable, can do work, but you do have to trust and verify what it's doing. So first, let's take a look at some strategies of how to write good prompts, because the better you can write a prompt, better you can ask ChatGPT what to do, the better your outcome is going to be. You can absolutely just go in there and ask it in a quick sentence to produce content for you. But if you provide it more information, the better off it's going to be. So we'll look at two approaches here. One, the co-star, and the second, prompt of prompts, which is, I think in my mind, really growing. From the co-star framework, it's about context, the objective, what do you want to actually do, style, how you want to do it, the tone, the audience, and the response. And if you're going to give ChatGPT this information, it's going to produce much better results. I think I've attended 5 conferences over the last 3 months, predominantly focused in the healthcare arena. And as I've talked to a lot of people, they've sort of downplayed what they got out of ChatGPT, and with follow-up questions, they weren't following an approach like this or just asking general questions. So if you do provide, context and objective or even style, this is an interesting exercise. Ask it to produce output like Bill Gates or Bill Murray or Shakespeare, and it will change that content. But I think most importantly, just tell it to act like an expert in your particular field. If it's marketing or healthcare or healthcare marketing, it will do a better job. And with some more advanced capabilities, particularly the Claude model, you can get it to write in your style or your team or your company's style by providing it examples. Obviously a tone and then audience. whether it's that first grader, sixth grade level, such as an average person, or a PhD level. And then you can control the output. How do you want it to be? Generate an email, a list, JSON. So it is very capable as you give it more information. But here's a quick example or prompt. I want to create a digital health application. Help me define the requirements. Pretend you're an expert product manager using a business tone for the average healthcare professional in a bullet point list. And it'll generate meaningful output. And we'll see examples of this. In the second one, prompt of prompts, what you're doing is asking Gen AI to help, to assist you. So there has been a year ago when ChatGPT started coming out and gaining a lot of traction, the idea of being a prompt engineer. Prompt engineer is an entire different profession has come around. But I think that's going to fade in the background because you can literally ask it to help you out in this prompt of prompts. And we'll see examples of this, but ask me questions. You know, ChatGPT, ask me questions about the topic so you better understand. Before you start, please ask me questions you have about this so I can give you more context, be extremely comprehensive. Or even just, hey, ChatGPT, create me an effective prompt to do X. I use this approach a lot when I want to generate an image in other platforms that do image generation. It's one thing, yeah, I want to generate, you know, a picture of cats, you know, walking across the sidewalk. But if you tell ChatGPT to create you a prompt and ask you questions, it'll generate a much more effective prompt for use. So let's look at a demonstration here. And in this first, I'm not providing any guidance. I'm not taking my own advice essentially, but I did ask it to create a new mental health application to help children overcome the fear of peanut butter sticking to the roof of their mouth. I was reading a science fiction story a while ago, and this was one of the main characters' challenges, the fear of peanut butter sticking to the roof of the mouth. And ChatGPT came back with a reply. But what was interesting, and you see this a lot as you'll start using it, there are surprising moments. It did detect, it did understand. There might seem to be a misunderstanding or a humorous aspect to what I'm asking. It knew this wasn't, the usual type of thing that you would ask for, and that more relevantly, you would address common concerns such as anxiety, stress, social and emotional development. All very true, but yes, I want to focus on the fear of peanut butter. So I ask it to just do that. Again, still with no guidance. It provides an app name. So I didn't ask it for an app name. I just said, help me create an application. Provided an objective to support an engaged platform for individuals struggling with the fear. And then I cut this short because it did generate a large list, but it generated a list of features around what you might do with your application. Guided exposure therapy, mindful techniques, progress tracking, community support, all very good. Virtual peanut butter challenges. It suggested tone, text around an app icon, and even marketing. So again, no guidance, no prompting. I got useful, interesting feedback. Now, we want to take our own advice here and looking at the prompt approaches, for that application, ask me questions to better understand what I'm looking to do. So again, because it understands the context, I don't have to tell it about my peanut butter application anymore. It just understands what that is in context of our conversation. And very quickly, it generates a list of questions to help it better understand. So by providing this information, the ChatGPT is going to be able to do a much better job. And so again, I cut this short because it generated a large list of questions. And even, I left this very open-ended. You could, if you don't have a lot of time, you could say, ask me top 5 questions kind of thing, and it'll really focus it down. But you notice here that it did focus on privacy and security as one of the questions that needs to be addressed, and how to make money, which is always important. Now you basically respond to these questions, and in the prompting, you can, if there's 20 questions, that might get cumbersome to write all of that out and keep track of all the questions. So you can refer back to how it can, the first question was what was the age demographic? Okay, children from 10 to 13. second question was, why did I want to do that? So, I didn't have to tell it here, my target audience is children. I could just say, number one, my answer is children from 10 to 13. You can also make it more conversational. You can actually ask ChatGPT to ask these questions one at a time, and it becomes more of a conversational flow. Very powerful. So a couple tips and tricks to get the most out of it. Again, as you get into more comprehensive, complicated topics, you can use variables and delimiters. So here, classify the sentiment of each sentence as positive or negative. Give the sentiment classification without any other preamble text. And this is an interesting one because ChatGPT and some of the other ones tend to be wordy, but by asking it to just tell me the basic classification, and then here's my sentence, the young boy dropped his ice cream cone, it tells me that that has a negative sentiment to it. And here I could just drop in 5 more, 10 more sentences, and it would just generate all that output. So instead of writing the whole thing multiple times, you tell it, pay attention and address what's in the brackets. Or definitely need to think about guardrails. So as we know, it hallucinates, has tendency to hallucinate, or can answer inappropriate questions. So, simply by telling it to do better, if the text does not contain sufficient information to answer, do not make up information if the answer is as NA. This is not 100% foolproof, but does have an impact. Likewise, scope and inappropriate questions. You're not allowed to answer questions related to something. So don't ask questions about age, gender, politics, or religion, helping to try and keep bias out of what you are generating. Don't use it for math. It is not a calculator. It will generate answers. It will be right a lot of the times, but unless you're going to go and do the math to cross-check it, I would not use it for math. So you can ask it averages, mean, correlation, coefficient, various statistical analysis between data. You can ask it, and sometimes it'll be right, but you really need to cross-check it. Where it has demonstrated usefulness is in anomaly detection, clustering. I just had an example of that, text analysis of sentiment, or trends analysis of patterns over time. I play, some of those, there's Wordle out there, and there's another where you group, you get a list of 16 terms and you have to group it into 4 sets. And, in playing with it, I dropped in the 16 terms, and it can create very easily the 4 clusters of those words. Not always right, not always what the New York Times is looking for, but it can generate that. So, act as a data scientist to analyze. And again, because your data set may be 100 data points, you don't want to put it all in here. So it's easier to consume. Only use the information provided, do the analysis, don't provide code. This last point is another good one too. A lot of the times when you ask it about analysis or math and those types of things, it does have a tendency to start writing your code as well. The interesting thing about math, some researchers have discovered very interestingly, if you reference Star Trek and put it in that context or sci-fi context, it tends to do better in answering basic math questions. That's something, if you have time, interesting to play with. An unexpected outcome. Couple more quick tips here. This one is, I've seen this go both ways, whether or not kindness matters, saying please and thank you. I think it does better. Other people have in research reports have said, just treat it like a machine and you get better answers. So I prefer to go with please and thank you. Slowing it down. This is a big one, particularly in helping eliminate the ideas of hallucinations. So where you are asking ChatGPT something rather complicated and where there might be multiple steps to arrive at the solution, if you don't ask it to explain the reasoning, the process, or go step by step, it tends to start veering off, particularly if it has multiple steps. So if you ask it for the explanation, the reasoning, the process, each step, it helps it keep on track better. Avoid negation. Doesn't do very well. If you tell it not to do the X, Y, and Z, so try and really focus on, do this. And then what's interesting too, there are biases in ChatGPT and the various responses and from the training data that is provided. Humans are biased as well. What I think is interesting about ChatGPT is that you can ask it to check for biases and ensure, and it will do a better job. So you can ask humans too. It's debatable whether or not us as humans can do it as well. Always think about privacy and copyright. Let's take a look at our specific examples, use cases, product versus project manager here. Where are we going to use it? And I break down the two different tasks as whereas product manager I think is more strategic and a project manager is more tactical focused. There's a lot of blurring between these types of things, and each role definitely probably assists and overlaps in the others, but I really think of product managers as being more high level, focused on that strategy, vision, customer requirements, roadmaps, versus project manager, which is in the daily details. But lots of variety in those roles. But why do we care? It is about efficiency, career growth. As we see in Forbes has released various news reports saying this is showing a positive impact. Meeting your business goals. How can we be more efficient? And we can want to move from that task management to feature planning to the strategic vision. And the better we can do at these levels, the better we can do with that strategic visioning. And what's interesting, you can ask ChatGPT about your strategic vision as well. So thinking about product management, what do we want to create? We can start at the very beginning in terms of your vision. We at Stenda do a lot of work in digital health. So my example was how to address the challenges of peanut butter getting stuck to the roof of your mouth. What are the top challenges doing X in you definitely want to do customer surveys, understand your audience, who are you developing features for, who are your users, why do they want to use your application? But you can get started really early on just asking ChatGPT the answers to those questions and can help frame conversations for you. What features does the user want? So again, more specific information you give, the better off you're going to be. If you just say, hey, I have a nursing application, I want to create, what features does it need? And it'll tell you answers because it'll guess at what you're looking for. But if you tell it in a cancer for pediatrics and a specific type of cancer, then it is going to adjust those features that it's going to tell you about. And I like using it the third one here, list 3 counterintuitive thoughts about X. As you're developing new product, whether you're going to take it to market or in-house, you don't want to be the same as everyone else. So this really gets you thinking, and that brainstorming concept of like, what are the counterintuitive thoughts about providing nursing caring for pediatric patients in diabetes, in cancer. And always, I ask this all the time, what's next? What am I forgetting? And that's, as you see here, when you're doing project management, product visioning, product development, you know a lot of things, what you're not exploring kind of thing. But there is this category of unknown unknowns, things you just haven't even thought about yet. And that's where this what am I forgetting question comes in really well. And as you're interacting with ChatGPT over time, it builds knowledge and experience about what you're doing, but you can always ask it what it's forgetting. In terms of user stories and requirements, you can help it. It can help you identify core requirements, missing requirements. Again, what am I missing? Identify contradictory requirements. So once you do have a list of requirements, and depending on the size of your application, you may have 50 user stories. Drop them all into Claude again, wearing, you have to think about privacy and those types of things, copyright, but drop them into the system, and you can identify, okay, requirement 1 and requirement 27 are contradictory, or 17 and 34 are really similar. without you having to go through all of them. Likewise, summarizing large documents, extract the requirements. So as you're doing user interviews, you're going to generate a lot of information, and you may even record those in a video fashion, just like this in Teams. You can ask it in various cases to one, extract the text of that and the requirements from it. And then you can use that as cross-check. So again, a lot of us can do this. A lot of us have been doing this for years. But this really helps speed you up. Maybe even just in terms of typing can help speed you up. So an example prompt: act like an expert healthcare software product manager. Please write a user story where a doctor enters information about a patient with diabetes to improve their health. And very quickly generates me just that. Here's title, user story, acceptance criteria, diabetes specific assessments, looking at blood glucose, A1Cs, medication adherence. And then again, if you're in this field and you're familiar with diabetes patient care, you may be well aware of these things, but it also can help speed you up just in terms of generating the list. And it continues. So looking at complications, care plan management, integration with devices. It's a huge part of diabetes management, the glucose monitoring. But as okay, I didn't give it a lot of information, so it didn't come out in the right style or template that we use or that you may be using. So you simply tell it, hey, here's the style I want, and you can say take that same information. I switched here to a different lab test information, but it changes preconditions, basic, post conditions, alternative flows, exceptional flows. So by telling it what format you use, then it can do better. And again, you can upload examples of yours and it will follow that. What's interesting for us as an organization, we are ISO 13485 standard compliant, certified, and we have specific policies and procedures we need to follow. And in the first example, I didn't tell it that. So then once I tell it, it knows to update, and where originally it uses the app must, we very much standardized around the word shall. And regulatory requirements come into play. So again, didn't have to go through all of the text and find all the examples and update it. It does it for me. Yes, always cross-check. Taking a deeper dive into those requirements and what does the system need to do. This particular chart is the ISO 25000 standard, and a lot of what we do from a software development process is checklist based. Let's make sure we're thinking about all of the different things that we need to think about. We may decide we're not doing them at a particular release or a particular sprint, but we know we're addressing them somewhere. And so I don't need to tell ChatGPT about all of these different areas. I can simply ask it, based on the ISO 25000 model, what are some app requirements? And then it'll start generating some of that information for me. So again, very high level, again, just typing, very simple level, allowed me to be more efficient. But then you can always ask it, what am I forgetting? So in healthcare or whatever your field is, what other standards should I consider when developing an app? How do I conduct a user interview? I did this fairly recently. I was doing some work around the idea of smell testing research. And I've been doing user interviews for 20 years now, so I can do this, but it does take some time. And I, told it my background, what I was looking for, who I was interviewing, provided some basic information from the person's, LinkedIn profile, and it generated me a list of 10 really good user interview questions. I did change and tweak them, but saved a lot of time. What should I ask the user? And then following up that, based on the transcript, what are the most relevant ideas that came out of it? Huge time savings. Again, identifying contradictions in the given set of requirements, and always ask, what am I forgetting? Because it'll do a pretty good job of that. So now we have an idea of what we want to do from a product perspective or a sprint perspective. How are we actually going to do that? And so looking at some prompts around the idea of design, and we can start very much blue sky, very early stages you don't have. So based on the following requirements, and this is again where you can list out those requirements afterwards, suggest 3 different architectural designs, compare and contrast different architectural patterns. So again, getting it to output more information and think about what the approaches are, pros and cons. And you can fine tune this. So, identify potential bottlenecks or issues in the proposed architecture. So, you really like a cloud-based API architecture. Well, what do I need to think about that? We want users to be able to use an API, but we worry it could lead to abuse. How might we balance flexibility and security here? Huge concern in healthcare in every profession, every field in terms of privacy. Security is hard. It's time consuming. We need to get an early version out the door to make sure we have product market fit. So how do we balance that early flexibility and security? Can I help you? And even from very detailed level, it can design SQL tables for storing, in one of my examples that I'll show in a minute, lab data. So again, I've been designing SQL tables for years, but a table even for basic patient demographics, how many times over the years have you typed first name, last name, varchar, or certain number of characters? This can help generate that information for you very quickly. And in terms of data modeling, generate data model in detail in tabular form. So again, here from there's an example of like a prescription, and then truncate this so it fit reasonably on the screen. But you can see that for each of the tables, it was generating an ID for that row, first name, last name, the type, length, constraints, description. I didn't have to tell it to do all of this information. This was sort of the default reply, but you can drive it to the next step and even tell it, hey, generate me the SQL to generate these tables. You can see where it's actually generating foreign keys back to these other tables. So very capable. Taking a step back from that product perspective, risk management is huge in healthcare and in every industry. Particularly in healthcare, because you're dealing with the health and wellness of people, and maybe you have to have the FDA to clear or approve what you're developing. So here it's like I'm developing a healthcare app that will be approved by the FDA. What standards do I need to be aware of? And again, providing it some format in a bullet list format. So generated here, FDA guidance, software development standards. Suggesting FDA pre-submission meeting. Highly recommended this idea. FDA is there to help you. Interoperability, how we're going to address those. So lots of good information, and then you can dive into each of these individual areas and ask it more questions. And if it understands what you're building, it can provide you more targeted guidance. I would not rely on this as expert advice. Definitely, talk to experts in the field, but this is going to give you a really good start. Along the ideas of risk management, cybersecurity, huge thing. The FDA now requires, if you apply to the FDA, submit information, you must have a cybersecurity plan. Part of that is your risk assessment. And so as I give ChatGPT information about the application that I'm creating, it can generate a cybersecurity risk assessment table, and this is a very standard thing. I didn't have to give it a lot of information around how to do a cybersecurity risk assessment. It understood that we look at things like likelihood and impact and multiply those together to a risk. What are some controls around those, mitigation strategies, responsible parties, kind of thing. I didn't tell it anything more than, hey, what my basic application was, and generate me a cybersecurity risk table. Again, and probably sound like a broken record. You're not relying on this exclusively, but it gives you a big jump start. So if you're even not familiar with the idea of risk management or cybersecurity risk management, following that CoStar prompting methodology that we showed earlier, educate a project manager on cybersecurity risk, write a blog article, act like an expert project manager, write an informative tone for a digital health project manager in the form of a 1,000-word blog article. So again, help educate yourself on the actual topic. Going a little step further here, we can look at sprint planning and assignments. So again, the ChatGPT has context of what we're creating because we've been using it. Pretend you're an expert software project manager. We're developing a drug prescription management system that integrates with an EMR. And I told it a little bit of information about two of my developers that I have on the team. Again, if you give it more information, it does better. And my final thing is, hey, please generate that list of tasks. And it does. It generates, a chart here and had numbers across them. And first column is that senior developer Tom, and the second column is developer Teresa. And you can see that there is some logical separation of duties here. That senior developer is going to have system architecture information. The developer is going to focus more on UI. The senior developer focus more on EMR integration planning, much more complex task, where Teresa is going to focus on the prescription workflow, database design versus interface development. So just by telling it, one person is more senior than the other, and nothing more beyond that, it's going to break some of these common tasks up. So senior developer here is responsible for code review and quality assurance, where Teresa is our handling and user alerts. But again, as you add additional team members, give it more information about what these team member specialties are, it can do a better job of this. And what I find very interesting is then you can use it for estimating as well. We're going to develop a screen to maintain patients' prescriptions. What are the requirements? Please estimate the time to develop each task. Again, so I haven't told it how to do these estimates, give it any frame of reference. And the more information you give it, the better. But here are some relevant tasks. Patient information, complexity is probably low, estimated time 1 to 2 days. Because this is fairly generic, I could argue that this patient information screen is definitely going to take more than a day or two. But ask it to break it down in terms of front-end work, back-end work, API work, testing effort, and it will provide estimates in all of those categories. But you can see here the relative level of complexity across these, where, okay, patient information, prescription status, prescription review, relatively low complexity, but entering a prescription or medication database integration gets a little harder. The complexity is more, and then as you get down to the bottom here, things like database design, technical leadership, performance optimization, these are higher, more complex. So useful information as you're processing. Very often, how many people have been, over the years, like, well, how long that project is going to take? Again, I wouldn't rely on this, but in terms of relativity, it'll give you a good idea of background information. Some bonus ideas to, likewise, in terms of testing, that you can use this for. Recommend a suitable testing methodology for a distributed system. Whereas before we were asking it about, what type of system, what should the architecture look like? Okay, we decided on, this is very generic, a distributed system. What's a methodology for testing that? Provide guidance on testing methodology and tools, generate test cases. Again, huge savings of time, generate test cases based on the requirements for the system, and then generate a test traceability matrix. This is a very time-consuming task given requirements in the test. You may have 100 requirements and then 5 or 6 tests for each of those requirements. You want to make sure each requirement is cross-checked and has test cases associated with it to make sure you're producing high-quality software. Very time-consuming exercise. You can feed that information into the system and it'll work out the mappings to create your matrix. Yes, you need to cross-check it and make sure it's accurate, but it is going to get you a significant way there. And also from a testing perspective, whereas before in requirements, and often I ask it, what am I forgetting? What's the next thing? You can also use it in testing, identify edge cases that may cause issues, particularly for people newer to the field, or you're newer to a healthcare or whatever field you're in. That if you're newer to that, what are some of the edge cases? Okay, I'm dealing with patient data in the healthcare system. Oh, I forgot about insurance. what does insurance IDs look like? What do benefits look like? Can help you identify a lot of those edge cases around there. And a bunch of other areas, we're not going to go into like deep dive on all of these, but for your user guide, again, based on your requirements and everything like that that you have generated over time, help me create a user guide or an FAQ. Feed in your requirements, create a glossary. This is a huge beneficial thing, as you are developing your design documents, your requirement documents, project plans, they're very often words you're using over and over again. And a glossary is a very common feature such that new readers can better understand what is being discussed. Get ChatGPT to help you create that glossary. And also, as we go through the product life cycle, and particularly a lot of people practice the agile methodologies, and you go through sprints, and you always want to conduct retrospectives and think about, okay, what did we do good? What did we, what could we have done better? Well, use ChatGPT, suggest a good, non-typical innovative retrospective environment. Hey, maybe you've been doing the same thing for the past 3 years. What's a new approach to it? It gives you lots of good options here. So overall, take-home message: be more efficient. And as we can see from the recent Forbes articles and surveys, it can help drive higher salaries, which is always nice. Use it, play with it, experiment with it. The more you use it, the better you're going to get at using it. Don't trust it, verify it. And there has been a lot of articles, and I'll call it anxiety, fear of, is AI going to replace you? I don't think AI is going to replace any of us anytime soon, but people using AI will. It makes a difference. With that, we'll go to questions in a minute, but just wanted to give everybody a quick update. We do have another webinar tomorrow. If you joined up as part of Philly Tech Week, this is also listed in the Philly Tech Week around stock guesstimating. How do you improve your estimates? There's a lot of human biases in how we develop estimates, and we'll talk about those and how to do better. So that is tomorrow at 12 Eastern. And then I recently just posted this morning. It's available on Eventbrite. Our next webinar is called Driving Quality in Digital Health, the Role of Using Gen AI in Testing. So where this high level focused on product development, product management, I had a slide or two on testing. We're going to take a deep dive in quality assurance and testing, and how we can use AI to enhance test case generation, data validation, data creation, and regulatory compliance. So that is all I have today.